welcome back to another episode of From Christ Podcast, a show where we inspire the masses to become financially free while building God's kingdom. On the podcast today, we have Miss Acquania Escarne. Miss Acquania is a financial coach, hotel owner, podcast host, and an independent life insurance producer with the Legacy Builders Group. She is committed to helping people find financial freedom and building wealth. In this podcast, we'll discuss how she helps people build wealth through life insurance and invest in real estate. So thank you for being here, Ms. Acquania.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
How are you doing today?
I'm well. I'm enjoying the fact that we have some rest and recovery for me coming up. I'm taking leave soon, so that's always good. And I love to talk about life insurance, so I'm excited about this conversation.
That's good. I'm also excited for this conversation as well. So how did you get started on this journey to financial freedom?
It's funny. It actually started well before I started selling life insurance. I was in high school. My dad bought me a copy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, and he told me to read it, and I did. And surprisingly, as a teenager, most people would assume you wouldn't want to be interested in a financial book like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but I was super inspired to the point where I read the book. I knew that I couldn't do everything in the book, but I wanted to do it eventually. And one of the things I decided at 16 was I wanted to retire early. I wanted to invest in real estate. And so at 16, I got my first summer job at a clothing store as a cashier and a sales associate. And I used my first paycheck from that job to start saving for my retirement in a Roth individual retirement account. And that's my path to building wealth. It started with a $252 check from a summer job.
Wow. That is amazing. That is amazing. I guess one of the questions I have, reading the book at 16, Rich Dad Poor Dad, how did it make you feel that, the people around you, like the other students, your peers, were not on the same page as you?
Interestingly enough, it didn't make me feel any type of way. I more so was very talkative about what I learned, and I was willing to share it, to the point where in high school, family members would come to me and ask me for money advice. They were coming to money. They would ask me what they should do with it. Individuals didn't know how to start saving or investing, and I'd give them tips. And I've always been that person who likes to help people with their money, talk about their money. So that was the spark, but then it became the beginning of my path to where I am now, where I'm coaching people about their money and how to use it, and using the knowledge that I've learned from my own experiences, as well as the books that I read since Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that have given even more strategies on how to build wealth.
That is pretty dope. You have me thinking, what was I doing at 16? Well,
what were you doing?
That's a great question. At 16, I was probably in 10th. I think I was in 10th or 11th. I remember having a candy business. That was like my first step into entrepreneurship. I had a candy business where I was selling things, like honey buns, Capri Suns, Gushers, Skittles. You can name it. Basically like the walk-in corner store, as they will say in New York City. And that was, I was making money there. I also did internships in the summertime. And just like you, I had a strong desire to know more about finance, but I guess not being around the right environment or not knowing exactly how to go about it. Like no one recommended me to read the Rich Dad Poor Dad. Like I actually read that when I was like 20, 21. That's the first time I actually read the Rich Dad Poor Dad. So yeah, so that's something I wish I, if somebody had pointed me like, oh, read this book or read that or listen to this podcast, it would have definitely changed a lot in terms of where I am right now.
That makes sense. I used to have a candy business too. I sold candy in 7th grade to my classmates to raise money to go to Spain. And I had a deal with my parents that if I could get enough money for spending money, would they split the cost of the trip? And they said yes. And that the rest is history. I took that trip to Spain with my class. I decided I wanted to see the world. I wanted to travel as much as possible. And I actually became a diplomat. Like that seventh grade trip determined the rest of my life, in that I went to high school and I was focused on going to a particular college or a particular type of college so that I could travel the world. I thought I would pursue law. I thought I'd be an international attorney because my mom worked with a lot of attorneys when I was younger, and that's all I knew was doctors and lawyers. They make money and they travel. And then I got to George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and I learned that you could work for the US government and you could travel the world and you don't have to go to law school. And that's why I became a diplomat when I first got out of grad school. That's my first career.
Oh, that's pretty dope. That is pretty cool. And I guess I want to ask a question just for parents who are listening. What was something that your parent did to like to help encourage that entrepreneurship journey? Because oftentimes, there's kind of like shame upon if the kid wants to know so much about money. Like, so how did your parent help push you and encourage you?
My parents were examples of what to do and what not to do. And they know this, so they won't be offended when they listen. My mom was a full-time entrepreneur most of my life, but she was a solo entrepreneur who hustled and grinded for everything. She would kick butt to pay the bills. And whenever she was short, she would get a part-time job to make ends meet. And so my mom has an accounting background and ended up seasonally working for the IRS during tax season to make extra money. But when she wasn't working for someone else, she had a full-time business. She sold life insurance. My mother had a rental. That was not one of her best experiences. She had a lot of problems with the rental, but she tried, She sold ATM machines and credit card processing services before credit cards were accepted everywhere. So my mom has always been the person to get into the industry early and try to turn people into investing in it too. But she really struggled because at the time she came out with ATM machines and trying to get gas stations to put them in their stores or to buy credit card services, gas stations were trying to be cash only. They felt like it wasn't something they needed to invest in. They didn't see the future and how everything we do now is pretty much a card, right? And so she was competing against in a market where everyone didn't see the future value of what she was providing. And then she ended up having to get out of that industry because the big banks caught on, and then they started just putting their machines into gas stations for free. And my mom was trying to split the cost by either getting the gas station company to buy the machine or they come up with an agreement. So it was tough. And I love the grit that I learned and observed from my mom, but I also learned from her what not to do. And that now that I'm an entrepreneur, I hire people to help me with my business. I understand the power of hiring people so that you can focus on the fun stuff, the vision, and expanding according to God's purpose for you. My mom being a solo entrepreneur and really struggling to make ends meet a lot of times, never had that faith that she could expand. And I was pretty much her one employee whenever she needed extra help. My dad, on the other hand, is a military veteran. Both of my parents went in the Army, but my dad retired from the Army. And he was interested in real estate because of his grandfather. My great grandfather, Felix Watson, was in Jamaica, moved to Panama when they were building a canal, and then eventually immigrated to New York and sent for his kids, and then really established a presence in Brooklyn, New York, where he was an integral part of the community, the church. He had several jobs. So he was a superintendent. He worked for the post office. He had a bodega, like corner store. He owned real estate in Brooklyn and used to take my dad with him to collect rents from the tenants, because this is when you would go in person. And my dad just noticed from that experience how his grandfather always had money He always had money coming. He always was giving it as well. He saw him giving to people in need. And whenever he had money, he would give it to somebody that he knew in the street, and everybody knew him. So my dad grew up with the mentality that real estate is the way to build wealth, and you want to have a lot of it, but you also want to be a good person in the community. So between the two of them, I grew up saying, I want to have my own business. I'm going to work hard, but I'm going to expand, and I'm going to invest in real estate because it works. You know, my great grandfather ended up buying a huge plot of land in North New York, that he eventually named Watsonville. So he had enough land to name it, to create a farm, and they had chickens and goats, and the kids could run freely. Watsonville's not really an established city anymore, but the whole ability for a Black man to do that is pretty impressive.
Wow, 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 wow. That is impressive. That is impressive. Very impressive. Wow, that's really impressive. That's good though. So that I definitely see how you took from both parents, and you merged the two lessons and the two different ideology and put it together to become who you are. So that leads me. How do you go about opening your first Roth IRA at 16?
Interestingly enough, you walk in the bank and you say, this is what I want to do. And I had actually just gotten my license too. So I can't remember if my mom went with me or if I drove myself, but I do remember the teller or the person at the bank who was assisting me at the time, because I had to go into an office, sit down, fill out paperwork. And she just looked at me and she said, are you sure you want to do this? Who told you to do this? And I said, I read about it. Haven't you? And she said, wow, I wasn't thinking about this at 16, and I can't believe you are. And then when I gave her the paycheck, she just kept saying, are you sure you want to do your whole paycheck? I said, yes, I don't need this right now. And I know it's going to be much, much more for me in the future if I just bite down and sacrifice now. And to be honest, that's a lesson I think you can take at any age, is to start where you can with what you have. Because I had a $252 paycheck, and I wasn't necessarily in a financial position after that first deposit to make a lot more deposits because my job was only for the summer. But when I got to college, when I was in high school and I had babysitting gigs, I would save some of my money from babysitting. I would save my coins. So, nowadays you have Acorns, you have Digit, all these apps that'll save coins for you. But I physically saved coins. And then my mom and I would wrap the coins every December and make a trip to the bank. And so if I save $75 in coins one year, that would be the deposit that I put into my retirement account for that year. And I kept doing that until I could afford to contribute more.
Well, that is definitely great, and I feel like that's definitely a great point. And why would you say it's important? You mentioned two things that I want to talk about. Why would you say it's important, one, to start where you are? Because oftentimes, especially in the minority community, we always think, okay, I need to work, work, work. I need to get to a certain level. So that's one part. Or, what you just mentioned is that oftentimes, like, yeah, even at 16, he was able to delay the gratification. He wasn't able to quickly spend. So it's either people on that one side where they think they need to get to a certain level, or they need to like, oh my God, there's all this money I need to spend. So how are you able to get that and understand that at a young age?
I just knew better. From 5 years old, when my mom took me to the bank to open a bank account, she taught me if you get $10, you tithe some of it, or save some of it, you can spend some of it, and then make sure that you plan it out. So I was the kid who always had money, always, always. Like my my friends in high school would be like, how can you afford to like treat yourself to stuff in the mall or go out to the movies and like not have an allowance? And I said, because I work and then I save it. And I knew that I didn't have a lot. So I had to make wise decisions because nobody was going to come and replenish my bank if I spent. But I knew from what I experienced, that when I saved up my money, I was able to do more things. So I was always about the next big thing. I was not really distracted by the small distractions or attempts to spend money during the week on stuff that I really didn't need, right? And I kind of kept that with me beyond high school. I did it in college too, because when I was in college, my first 2 years, I worked 2 jobs and went to school full time because my scholarships didn't cover my education. But I kept applying for scholarships in college until I got a free ride my 3rd year. So when I got a full ride, I didn't know what to do with myself because now I didn't have to work. My school was going to be paid for, and I had a small stipend to cover travel home each year. And I almost went crazy because I was like, who is Acquania who doesn't work 2 jobs, who's able to volunteer, who has money to not worry about school? That was foreign to me. So I think everyone can do it. They just have to have the mindset that it's better for me if I wait, or there's a better return if I wait. And then the second thing you mentioned, it's important to know you can't save yourself to wealth. You have to invest. That's why I knew that if I wanted to retire early, I can't just wake up and say, oh, one day I'll save for that. One day I'll save for that. Because then you never save for it. But if you commit to do one transaction today, and then you see what you can do tomorrow, and then you see what you can do after that, you'll constantly be contributing to your goal. And the money has nothing to do but grow. And I still have the Roth IRA. I was actually able to use some of that money to purchase my first house because the IRS allows you to take money out of Roth IRAs to buy a house. So I also was able to leverage something in my 30s that I started in my teens.
Wow.
And that's priceless.
Now that is priceless. That's a great investment when you look at it, 14 years or so. Now that is
Mhm.
definitely a great investment. So my next question is, what led you to stay so focused on helping people specifically with life insurance and invest in real estate?
That's a good question. So it really started for me in 2015 as a goal to help people save $500 because my job at the time had sent me to Dubai for 3 years, and my family and I lived in the United Arab Emirates from 2012 to 2015. And when we came home, I'm trying to adjust to being back in the US. Now I have 2 kids. I left with one. And I'm getting into like, what's going on? What have I missed? And I remember reading an article that said most Americans don't have $500 saved for an emergency. And I thought that was the craziest thing. I said, how do you not have $500? Like, what is it that's causing people not to reach that goal? And the article had said $500 is the amount that it takes for someone's budget to be wrecked, someone's emergency car repair to offset them so much they have to go to payday loans. And that's the spiral they can't get out of, because back then predatory payday loans were and still are like the worst. So I started on Facebook a savings challenge that I had found at my own bank that basically was like, if you save $1 more a week than you did last week, you can save $1,300 by the end of the year. But because I'd started in June, we had enough weeks left to save $500. So I started out week 1. Hey, everybody, save $1. Week 2, hey, everybody, save $2. Week 3, et cetera, et cetera. And people started catching on. Like, oh, I'm working, or when's the next update? And, then I would ask people, what are you saving your money towards? And most people were like, Christmas. I decided to save early for Christmas gifts. So I said to myself, hey, I kind of like this, helping people save and talking about money. And then I provided other tips too. And so I was talking to my own financial advisor about GoFundMe. And I was like, it really bothers me that GoFundMe is the solution for so many people of color to pay for a funeral. And life insurance is so affordable, right? As long as you're young, you're healthy, or reasonable. So he was telling me like, oh, you should get licensed. It's pretty easy. Take a test. You're going to have to study. I studied really hard because I'm a perfectionist. I like to study hard, go hard. I didn't want to take the test more than once. And most of the tests I've taken in my life, that's all it took. I passed the first time and be done. I didn't want it to be different with life insurance. So I studied, I went back to the library, I focused, I passed. And then I made it my mission that if I don't do anything else, I'm going to help Black families get life insurance so they do not have to be on GoFundMe to raise money for funerals.
Oh, wow.
And that's it.
That is amazing. And it's funny you talk about GoFundMe. Because it's always interesting, like, as young as I am, 24, it's always interesting in why that was always the first resource that people go to, especially in the community. Like, oh, and everybody send a link out, and sometimes it could be a scam, and you have to be mindful of that. So it's just like, and it's very interesting. Even now, you know, people still are very skeptical about life insurance and things like that. So I guess my question to you is, why would you say life insurance is important, and why someone should have life insurance?
Life insurance is important because for a young person like you, 24 years old, I have clients paying 10, 15, $20 a month for $100,000, $200,000 policy. It is term, so term insurance is temporary. It does expire, but it is the type of insurance that is the lowest cost, gives you the highest death benefit. And if you can spend money to go to happy hour, you can spend money to get life insurance. Now, permanent life insurance, which is the other type that exists, and I've used it to build wealth as well. That's what I've used to invest in real estate. It costs more. So it is more expensive. And that's because it's guaranteed to be paid out. So the companies are charging more for you to get it. But it's a good product for certain people, depending on their health and their situation. But the main reason that life insurance is so invaluable is because it is a guaranteed way to leave a legacy. Life insurance is inherited tax-free by your family when they do inherit the money. So that's money that they can get to help support their lifestyle, the one you work so hard to create, so that your kids, your spouse can continue to live and grieve, but not have to worry about finances. Because who wants to cry and be sad about you not being here and then also have to think about how are we going to pay for this funeral? And then after the funeral, how are we going to pay this mortgage? And how are we going to feed the kids? Because if you've been living off a 2-income household, how do you keep doing that if you don't have life insurance? If you are a single mom, how do your kids eat? Who takes care of them? Most family members who take over the care of other children for whatever reason do not necessarily have the finances to take on children. Maybe that's why they don't have children, or maybe they have their own children and now they're taking care of your children. So my rule of thumb is, if there is anyone that depends on you for income, you need life insurance. So single people need it too. You may not have your own children, but do your parents ask you for money? Do your siblings ask you for money? Are you paying somebody's rent or college tuition, a godchild or a niece or a nephew? If that is you, you need life insurance. And you don't have to go for the most expensive type. You can go for term. You can have some coverage so that at least if something happens to you, your family doesn't have to figure out the finances. Because even when you have GoFundMe, a lot of times that's still just to cover a funeral. That's not going to maintain the lifestyle that the kids still have to live. And I would never want my family to have to move out of the house that I raised them in because now my husband can't afford it without my income. So that's the main reason. But other than that, life insurance is actually the cheapest way to settle some of your final bills. Your final tax bill. People think when they die, Uncle Sam doesn't want your last tax bill. That is not true. You have to file taxes. And sometimes you owe. And where's that money coming from? So I always tell people, if you can't name 3 people in your family that you could call up right now and ask for $20,000, and they would give it to you and not expect anything in return, no repayment, then you probably need life insurance at a minimum to cover your funeral expenses. Because most family members do not have someone who's just going to shell out $20,000 for a funeral.
You're 100% right on that. And it's funny you mentioned the 20,000 because I just read an article last week and it says I think it's like 34% or 44% of African Americans who are saving for retirement only has the average account of 20,000. So if they only have an average account of 20,000 for retirement, they definitely don't have 20,000 to give if you pass away. And I definitely love how you explain the whole process of why you need life insurance. And I definitely want to go on because you say you use whole life insurance to build wealth. So how can one use life insurance as a tool to build wealth?
That's an excellent question. And I'm going to give the short version because I'm actually teaching a live course about this right now because it is a strategy to it. And it does take some knowledge and education before you jump out there. But long story short, get permanent life insurance. So the type that doesn't expire, but also the type that earns interest or dividends. Whole life insurance is a type of permanent insurance, but the strategy that I use to invest in real estate, I actually recommend you use index universal life policies, which is like a cousin of whole life. They're all permanent insurance, but they're different types. And I like index universal life because it earns interest, but it's not invested in the stock market. So you're not susceptible to any volatility to stock market. The cash that you have in the policy tends to not lose value, but it has the potential to earn almost 12% return. And it's accessible to you while you're alive. So this is the product that most people think I have to die to use my life insurance. And they're like, no, you can actually use it while you're alive. You can take the cash out of it. You can utilize that to do down payments on housing. You can utilize that to create your own bank. So in my particular case, my husband and I took 40,000 out of a life insurance policy, and we invested in 3 properties in 1 year. One was a home for ourselves, one was a home for my mother-in-law, and one was a rental property that produced cash flow. And so when you're using the money to invest in other assets that appreciate, that create cash flow, you are then leveraging life insurance. And what we ended up doing was taking advantage of the cash flow of the rental and eventually selling it to another investor 2 years later. So we had 2 years of cash flow and then we got to sell at a profit. Then obviously we're still in our own home, but that one investment has already paid for itself because our house appreciated significantly in just 5 years. And now I can't even afford to buy my house because it's just so expensive that I'm like, I would never leave because yeah, I would get a lot of money for it, but the market is so crazy that to buy another house, I'd need to go into a whole nother tax bracket. So I'm going to sit in this house, enjoy this appreciation. And when I'm ready to sell, I know that I'm going to have more than enough extra, right? So one of the things you can do is utilize the money in life insurance to invest in other assets that appreciate, that create cash flow. You can choose to put the money back into the policy if you want to, but you don't have to. If you decide not to return the money, they just take it out of the death benefit. So that's the money that goes to your family when you do die. They will just take it out of the death benefit.
That is well explained. And why specifically real estate? Why should people take the money from their life insurance and put it into real estate?
To be honest, you can do whatever you want. I just chose real estate because of the influence that my dad had on my life and the experiences he talked about in owning real estate. I've just found that it is a great way to expand your ownership. And it's also a way to produce cash flow, because real estate is finite. Land is limited. When you run out of land, where else are you going to go? I mean, of course, we'll be in outer space and living on Mars, but when it comes to here on Earth, we know that land is limited, and therefore real estate is potentially limited as well. And that's what really drives the value. And when you're investing in the right areas, it's a good investment today, tomorrow, and in the future, because it'll continue to grow in value. And that's where we are now, where I live. Houses have continued to appreciate even in a down market, which is not normal for certain cities. So you got to know where you're investing. You got to really look at what are the communities doing where you want to invest. Are they going up, up? And they have good schools and they have potential in the future to be worth more? Or are they depressed and possibly not going in the right direction? So those are the things to look for. But for me, it was a comfort level. But I will say, I started out in rentals. I quickly realized after 2 years, I don't like being a landlord per se. So now I do a lot of commercial real estate investing. So that's how I got into hotel ownership. That's how I invested into apartment buildings, because most people don't know this, but when you invest in apartments, it's not one person. It's a group of investors who bring their money together and as a company buy the unit. So you could have 100 apartments, you could have 300 apartments, you could have 400 apartments, but a group of people own that. And then those group of people split the rent. So I don't have to worry about individuals paying the rent. I have a property manager who's managing that, but I get to split the profit with all my other investors. And I don't have to do as much work as when I was a landlord and I had to take tenants to court if they didn't want to pay their rent, or I had to fix things. I don't have to do that individual work anymore.
That is definitely great. And are you an active investor in your commercial and real estate thing, or are you a passive
Passive.
investor?
So active investors are the ones on the ground, finding the properties, fixing the properties, doing everything, doing the most. That is not me. I am a passive investor, which means in most cases, I've contributed capital. I get to know the financials of the project and I get the cash flow from the project, but I do not have to do the day-to-day to manage the project. And so passive is my cup of tea. I love it. And I will continue to invest that way. But in order to become a passive investor, you have to start investing and have capital. So it all goes back to 16 years old and that first deposit towards my future, and building capital at a time where I knew once I had more money, I can invest more money. But I'm able to invest as much as I do now because I started early.
No, that is definitely great. And I guess I want to ask one question in regards to the commercial part. How do you evaluate deals, even as a passive investor? Like, well, okay, this is what I'm going to put my money into, or not.
It's a couple of different ways. One, I definitely try to do deals with people I have a relationship with. So I'm constantly building my network and introducing myself to others who are doing things that I want to do and are investing in projects that I want to support. But I'm also participating in the process of doing my own due diligence. I look at the webinars, I look at the slides, I look at the numbers. If I have someone who can verify the information, I will also have that happen. So I do my own due diligence to confirm that what they're presenting to me is what is actually going to happen, or what could potentially be the returns in that type of project. And then I have a prayer on it. And once I pray on it, if God says this is the next move for you, the money leaves my hands and goes to theirs, and that the rest is up to God. Like, to an extent, you have to take a leap of faith, because investing can always go up or down. There's no guarantee that any of the projects that I'm invested in are going to be profitable. They have the potential to lose money. I know that, but I don't invest more than I'm able to potentially lose if the worst happens. So when it comes to real estate, I'm very open, honest, networking, and aggressive, but I only use cash that I literally can afford to lose. Whereas in my retirement accounts, that is money I can't afford to lose because I need to retire one day for real, for real. And I know I can't get loans for retirement. So in my retirement accounts, that is a more stock market index funds, diversified index funds. But for the real estate deals, I can make choices and then I go out on a leap of faith.
That is definitely great. And speaking of faith, like you just mentioned, when investing, there can be ups, there can be down. How has your faith, help you, stay committed to this process and not give up and not get distracted by the different things that could happen or have happened?
Yeah, God has shown me what to do, when to do it, and even when not to do it. I tell you, recently I was praying on something and I was like really intrigued by the idea, but it was more than I wanted to spend on something in my business. And I wasn't quite sure the person that was pitching it was the person I needed to work with. I was just really like, I don't know. And so I prayed on it and God sent me to um Kings, and it was, the story about Solomon and becoming king and how other people thought they would be in line for that position. And I have a study Bible, and inside of the study Bible, it was so interesting. The day that I decided this wasn't for me was the day when I read, you know, um, everything has to come in alignment with God's timing and God's will. And so I've had a vision of what I'm supposed to do and accomplish. And I don't know the full how, but I know that it's to make a greater impact. And so when I read that and it said alignment with God's timing and his will, that's when I kind of said, this is not his timing. And as such, you don't need to invest that much money into that particular project right now. So for me, my faith has shown me it's helped me avoid the shiny object syndrome, which anyone who doesn't know, most entrepreneurs are great ideas, creatives. They have a lot of things they want to do. And sometimes new ideas come along and they want to do those too. But the reality is we can't do everything at the same time all the time. Sometimes you have to focus on one thing. And so in that moment, God showed me, first of all, read scripture, be rooted in me, and make sure that you're doing it according to my timing and my will. And a few weeks later, it was better timing. I found a better company and I prayed on it and God said, okay, so that's how I really rely on God in my business as an entrepreneur. He's my CEO. He guides me and helps me to make the best decisions for my company.
That is wonderfully said, and I definitely want to like ask the patient part because you explained that yes, God has a will for all of us, but oftentimes people struggle with the timing, being patient. So how do you personally go about practicing, I guess, patience slash
Yeah,
discipline?
it's
So how, yeah.
hard. It's hard, but sometimes I pray on it. I consult with my husband too. He's my voice of reason. My husband is super supportive. He's in the private sector and he's the breadwinner at times. He's always made more money than me when I was in my career job and he's in his career job. So when I make decisions, even though I'm the one who normally handles the money stuff, I still incorporate him. And I ask for his opinion because I know that he's coming from a supportive heart. So he's not going to speak against it out of jealousy or distaste, but more so like, is this the best move right now? So he helps me be patient too, because he'll bring laughter to the situation, another perspective to the situation. And sometimes he's even brought resources. Like I remember my first hotel deal, he knew somebody who could vet the deal. So he sent it to his friend, you know? And I was like, oh, okay, great. So then I was able to make that decision with confidence. So, but patience is a struggle with us as humans anyway, because we want to do so many things.
Yeah.
And life will make you think it has to be now because so many things are rushed, and social media shows you all these things people are able to do because they have accomplished a certain status, a certain level of wealth. But social media doesn't always show you the struggle, the prayer, the patience, you know. And I, like I said, I started at 16, but I did simple things for a very long time to reach wealth. I invested in my work retirement account every paycheck. I saved for vacations before they happened. I saved for a property before I bought it, you know. My husband and I rented out our home, and we utilized that rental income to build significant savings as well. I did a lot of things that everyone else can do before I invested in a hotel. You see what I'm saying? It took
Yeah.
15, 16 years before I had the capital to make that kind of move. But some people out here just think, well, she has a whole bunch of money and she just woke up one day and she just started buying hotels. Nah. I made sure my retirement account was straight first. You know, I made sure that we could afford to have good memories with our family first. And then I made hotel investment moves and apartment investment moves and leveling up the people that I was around who could show me how to leverage the resources I had in front of me. So I think the number one thing people need to understand is you are not going to go from zero to millionaire overnight. It may take 15 years, but once you get there, you still have to be a good steward of your money.
You're right. Yeah, 100% right. And I like the fact that you said that your husband is the voice of reason. And that leads me to a question, how do you go about, let me rephrase that. Why is it important to be around people, like-minded individual? Because, who knows, whether your husband wasn't somebody who supports you and things of that sort, it could have it has a big effect on how you go about investing and things of that sort. So how is it important to have someone around you that can support you in those times that you're confused?
I think that's critical. You're either going to pay for a mentor or you're going to pay for mistakes. I'm glad that my circle includes mentors, peers, and higher who have accomplished what I want to accomplish or are on the same path as me. And that way I have people to bounce ideas off of. And I also have people who already done it. So I can ask them, what did you do? Like, no BS, just tell me the step by step. And then I'll determine if that's something that I can do too. And that's a game changer too, because when you're around the right people, you're going to be motivated to want to do more. You're going to be like, oh, you saving your money? I want to save my money too. Oh, you going on a Christmas vacation and you going to start paying for it in January? Oh, I'm going to do that too. So I can go with you. So people around me are leveling up and I'm leveling up. Like, oh, you're the youngest hotel owner and you African American? That's my friend Devon. Oh, well, let me try to see what I can do for my babies, you know? So getting hotels that you could pass on to your children, like that's the real come up, you know? It's essential. You have to surround yourself around the people that you want to be and the one and it's and aspiring where you want to be.
Uh, you couldn't have said it any better. I definitely like how you say you either pay for mistakes or you pay for mentors. I feel like oftentimes people underestimate, learning from other people's mistakes. That's something I don't like making my own mistake. I like to learn from other people's mistake. Um, and you said it very great. Either you pay for mentors You pay for the mistake. So that leads me to, what would you say is the number one reason people struggle with building wealth? Because people listen to a lot of podcasts, different resources, but they still struggle with building wealth.
I think it's two things. So one is mindset, but don't get me wrong. You can't just fix your mindset and think that the wealth will flow. It is a part of the process. And if you don't have the mindset that you can achieve it, you will be in your own way. But then you also have to have resources and a plan. I tell my clients all the time, sometimes you need to make more money. Sometimes you need to track the money that you're spending. Sometimes it's a combination of the both of them, right? I have some people who they make good money. They just don't know where it goes. They can't tell me how much their life costs, their housing, their bills, and they can't tell me how much they're saving because they're not, right? But I have other clients who make $30,000 a year, but are able to have life insurance. They're able to have side hustles, businesses, and they might be making $30,000 a year today, but they have a plan on how they're going to make $50,000 and $100,000 tomorrow. And so I feel like the mindset is key, but the action is how you execute it. And you have to have both, because if you don't think you can achieve it, you won't. If you do think you achieve it, you will. But then you need a plan. And I'm a planner. So I'm tracking my spending, I'm tracking my wealth, I'm planning my next move. I'm strategically putting my investments in a position where every 3 to 5 years, something's going to sell or pay out, and I'm going to be able to reinvest it. But I'm going to have an influx of cash flow eventually every single year in my life. But right now, I'm planting seeds. I'm researching deals. I'm putting money into the investments that are aligned with my purpose and what I believe in. And then I am patiently waiting for them to grow, sell, profit. That's it.
Nah,
So I'm on that long-term patient game.
no, that is definitely great. That is definitely great. So, where do you see yourself in the next five years?
Oh, the next 5 years, I definitely will probably be semi-retired or flexible in my need to work. I definitely want to have a significantly 3-4 times larger life insurance business with additional women working with me to help more families build wealth. I focus on women because I was raised by a single mom, and because I know that women have been marginalized and not paid equally to our male counterparts, but yet we're expected to build wealth off of less. And so I've put a lot of passion into helping women figure out, how do we take our less and make more? How do we support our children if we're single moms and still build legacies? And so I do have couples. Don't get me wrong. I have clients who are couples. I have clients who are men, but my target audience is women of color. And 5 years from now, oh my gosh, my son will almost be done with high school, my oldest. I'll definitely continue to travel the world. I'm at 38 countries and I want to hit 40 by 40 and just living life on my own terms. I'm already semi prioritizing travel over other people's BS. So I'm almost there.
That is definitely great. I definitely want to say thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for your time. If you have any word of wisdom, what would that word of wisdom be?
Get life insurance. Contact me if you want to know how it can fit into your overall plan, but let's do better to provide for our families for when we're not here.
That's great. And where can people find you and keep in touch with you?
You can check me out at thepurposeofmoney.com. That's my website. You can also find me on Instagram at the purpose of money, or on Twitter at purpose_money. I'm most active on Instagram. I'm sharing free wealth building tips all the time. And on my website, you can check out my course and even book a free consultation.
That is definitely great. like always, for those who are listening, I hope you guys take action, just not only listen. And if you don't know, I have a free investing guide you can that show you how you can get started in the stock market completely for free. And you can get it on my website, wealthandchristbrand.com. And thank you again, Miss Acquania, for your time. Pray God continue to bless you and your business. And stay tuned for next week's episode.